Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2022, and today FiveThirtyEight has released their official 2022 election forecast. We always await these in elections that are super important to us. We saw them in the 2018 midterms, we saw them in the 2020 presidential election, and the day before I am actually going to release my next Senate election projection, we have a model from FiveThirtyEight that shows us about even odds between the Democrats and the Republicans, calling it a toss-up for the United States Senate. Now, this is not nearly as good for Democrats as or Republicans as the House forecast currently is. This will be the last thing that I talk about on my, third iteration of this video. The FiveThirtyEight forecast, I think, deserves individual videos for the Senate, House, and governorship, just mainly because there's so much to talk about, and I definitely need to take a closer look at the House elections because this model dropped about 2 hours ago. So the Senate one I've already sort of taken in and taken a look at in terms of the Republicans and the Democratic Party's chances. We're going to talk about some super important states, some super important margins here within the states, because the Senate results are quite surprising, at least to me. Now, I know that it was going to be close, but I thought at least the Democratic Party would be the narrow favorite within the FiveThirtyEight model. Obviously, that's something that's very difficult to predict, especially considering that FiveThirtyEight has a lot more information and a lot more backing to their claim than I do. But I do think that at this point in time, Democrats still strike me as the narrow favorite. There are some states here where I will personally disagree with, but I want to take a look at because, of course, I trust this model. I don't trust it enough to say throw out my entire prediction, but I do trust it enough to tell us at least where the leaders are in some of these states and what we should roughly expect in the November midterms. Now, for a reference, back in 2020, FiveThirtyEight did a model as well for this Senate race, Senate elections, and they found that Democrats were favored to win the Senate. And they did. And the margin here was never really super substantial, but it was larger than what the Democratic Party had actually won. The average seats, according to this model, were Democrats winning 51.5 seats. It was right in terms of the victor, but not right in terms of the average seats. But then you go back and you take a look at other forecasts. You go to 2018 and you go to 2016, and you find some different things. 2018, it was correct. It predicted Republicans had an 80% chance at control of winning the Senate or maintaining control of the Senate, and they did. You also saw 2016 inaccurately predict who was going to win the Senate, but the margins here were never really as clear, and now it is a true and total toss-up. FiveThirtyEight can be correct, sometimes it's not, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's a very informational source and one that is almost, typically speaking, accurate when it comes down to the majority of these races. So this is the forecast in front of you. It looks very similar to the 2021, and that's because it seems to follow the exact model that the 2021 did. 2018 was different. 2016 was similar to 2018. So it looks like they're adopting this new model for future forecasts. And it's one that I personally do like. And looking at the forecast for all of these races, you may see dots and boxes around some of these states. The states with 2 dots means that these states are not up for re-election in 2022, such as Michigan, Minnesota, Montana. These are states where the Senate races are settled in other election years, not 2022. There are 34 races on our map currently. 34 races, which the majority of them are considered to be solid. We're going to briefly talk about some of these solid states. There's no real surprises when it comes down to the solid states. Many of them you should expect, but also just want to take them into consideration so we can move on and move forward, even though some of them might be expected to be more competitive than they are, according to FiveThirtyEight. To begin, California, of course, a safe blue state. Oregon, a safe blue state as well. Washington is rated as likely Democrat, but the Democrats have a 93% chance of victory. Realistically, it isn't going to be that competitive. Democrats might see it narrow up relative to the 2020 election results, but Patty Murray is more than likely going to win re-election, as detailed by this FiveThirtyEight prediction. Looking over at the state of Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, Kelly Tshibaka, top 2 contenders. There's a reason why I almost always characterize this state as safe red. No matter who wins, the top 2 are Republicans, so the balance of power really won't change. Utah is safe red. Some people might see this as a surprise because Evan McMullin is getting 33% of the vote. Realistically, McMullin was never going to defeat Mike Lee, but he does show an interesting showing and will be a true test if anti-Trump Republicans are willing to vote for an independent rather than the Republican nominee, if that Republican nominee isn't President Donald Trump. For the state of Idaho, safe red. North and South Dakota, safe red. Kansas, Oklahoma, twice, safe red. Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, nothing super competitive there. Democrats are safe in Maryland, Connecticut, New York, Vermont. Vermont is an open seat. Some Republicans thought maybe it could be competitive. Realistically, it was never going to be competitive. Potentially, maybe if Phil Scott decided to run, but even then, that would be a stretch. That would be essentially running Hogan in Maryland, where he might have gotten within 10 points, never was going to win the race at the end of the day. Illinois, solid Democrat. So we've moved on from all of the safe red states, but we actually have two additions from states you might not necessarily expect to see within this column. You have Iowa, which Chuck Grassley has a 99% chance of victory. If you know Chuck Grassley, you know this is expected, but if you know Iowa, you might not necessarily expect it. The state of Missouri gives Eric Greitens, the front-running Republican candidate here, who is probably the worst Republican candidate, a chance of 94% at winning. He will probably win this election regardless of the scandals thrown at him, but he's probably the worst GOP nominee. But if the worst GOP nominee is performing with a 14-point expected margin of victory, what does that say about the partisanship of the state of Missouri? The state of Florida gives Marco Rubio a 94% chance of victory. They predict about a 12-point victory over Representative Val Demings. Very, very fascinating, but I can't say it's unexpected entirely. Marco Rubio was always going to win this Senate race. The question was how much. I've almost always had it in the likely Republican column. I think maybe one time, actually not one time. I had it outside of the likely red column, and it stays there, according to 538. So we've moved through practically all of the states that we know how they're going to go, and we can get into the more competitive, more grueling, more interesting races as we move from the West Coast over to the East Coast. So we start off in the state of Nevada. This was a state that was actually pretty competitive back in 2016. Catherine Cortez Masto replaced Harry Reid in the Nevada race, in the Nevada Senate, and that's because he chose to retire. He was someone who had served in the U.S. Senate for a significant period of time, and then Catherine Cortez Masto decided to take his place, but only won against, I believe, Joe Heck by a margin of 2.4% across the state. Cortez Masto only won a singular county. Even Biden was able to do better than that. Catherine Cortez Masto won in Clark County. But the interesting thing about it is that in 2020, Nevada had a presidential election, and the margin of victory was, guess what, 2.4%. You go back to Hillary Clinton's margin of victory in Nevada in 2016, 2.4%. It seems to be this curse associated with the Democratic Party, a narrow lead within the state, but regardless is still a victory. In the 538 forecast, Catherine Cortez Masto has a 55% chance of victory over Adam Laxalt at 45%. The margin here is expected to be narrower than 2.4%. The margin is expected to be 0.8%. The Democrats should be happy about this number because Nevada had always been a prime target for them as soon as Cortez Masto won back in 2016. It was always on the radar because it's almost always close. Even in 2018, when the Senate elections went to the Democratic Party in some races, but Republicans in the other did gain seats, but realistically speaking, Democrats defended a lot of territory successfully. Jackie Rosen only won by 5. It was exactly 5 over Dean Heller, the incumbent Republican, which I get it. Running against an incumbent is more difficult. But keep in mind our national environment. Democrats were winning the popular vote by 8 points nationwide on the House level. Nevada only went to Jackie Rosen by 5. By that number and that swing alone, Nevada probably should have gone to President Trump in 2020. But it didn't, because Democrats have a lot to fall back on. We're seeing that happen now this time around. Surprisingly enough, in Arizona, Mark Kelly has a better chance than Catherine Cortez Masto. I have believed in that for different periods of time. There were times where Nevada was more red than Arizona was, but sometimes I've sort of seen the opposite argument, where Arizona should be more competitive than Nevada. Mark Kelly is a strong candidate, and that is recognized within these numbers. In fact, 538 expects Mark Kelly to win larger than what his 2020 margin of victory was across the state of Arizona. If you go back and take a look at the 2020 election results in Arizona, I find this funny, you will see that the margin of victory for Mark Kelly was 2.3%. Very close to the state of Nevada. Very, very similar margins, very, very similar expectations. Democrats are expected and projected to win both. The numbers get better for the Democratic Party. Michael Bennet wins Colorado with expected margin victories of 9 points, less than 9 points, and 85% chance at victory. Republicans lucked out. Joe O'Dea is definitely the right nominee, especially one to maybe turn this race into a dark horse race where no one expects the GOP to win, and then they come out of nowhere and end up clinching the Senate seat. I don't think that's going to happen. I trust this model, and I trust Michael Bennett's name recognition and popularity across the state, but we've seen bigger surprises before. Right now, I would keep an eye on it, but it's definitely not prime target number 1 for the GOP. It would just be a shock if it was to be a GOP victory for all the reasons I just described. Moving over to the state of, let's actually do Wisconsin first. Ron Johnson is actually the expected winner against Mandela Barnes. Now, I agree with that, at least momentarily. Ron Johnson has been unpopular twice. 2010, and 2016. It mattered more in 2016 because he was the incumbent running against a former incumbent who had won by similar margins in the past, but Ron Johnson ended up winning in 2016 by 3.4%. Donald Trump only won the state by 0.7%. So when you have a senator, such as Ron Johnson, outperforming the top ticket Republican by nearly 3 points, that tells you that this incumbent is strong, or at least in a way that you might not expect. Ron Johnson was in the low to mid 30s in terms of approval back in 2016, and he is right now. Yet the forecast expects Ron Johnson to win with a 72% chance of victory and a 5-point margin of victory. Why might that be? Well, it largely has to do with the fact that Ron Johnson's election performance has rarely been determined by his approval rating. He has lucked out. 2010, 2016, 2022, all years that Republicans were expected to do well, did do well, whatever it might be, he has lucked out. And it's done it again. Ron Johnson, I think, will win re-election. Do I think by 5 points? Maybe. It's less than 5 points, so the lean characterization holds up. I think it makes sense to characterize it as lean. But, of course, this is by chance, not by margin. At the end of the day, Ron Johnson serves as a realistic chance of victory for the Republican Party in a state that might have gone another way had there been a different contest. Maybe if Tammy Baldwin was back looking at this race as the incumbent, it probably would be lean Democrat, maybe even likely. But Republicans lucked out. They got Ron Johnson to run again despite his wishes of retiring and not running for a third term. Essentially, they got their way, and it looks like they will continue to do so across the state of Wisconsin. Next, we have the state of Ohio, which gives J.D. Vance, the Republican, about an 89% chance of victory. But the fact that Tim Ryan has even a 1 in 10 chance of victory in Ohio is quite surprising. And I say it's quite surprising looking back at the 2016 election result in the state of Ohio. Donald Trump won by 8.1%. You might be thinking, okay, that was 2016. That was a year in which Ohio went to the GOP candidate, Rob Portman, by over 20 points. So go to 2020. Okay, I will. Ohio still voted for President Trump by 8%. It was a difference of 0.1. The point being that after 4 years, despite practically every other state having a more substantial shift, Ohio was one of the states with the least significant shifts across the entire state. Minnesota moved by 6, Kansas moved by 6, Colorado by 9, Georgia by 5. Ohio, on the other hand, another swing state, a state that Obama won twice, shifted by 0.1%. Things like that don't just happen unless there's some heavy Republican base within the state. And I think it makes sense. But the 1 in 10 chance for victory for Tim Ryan is at least a little surprising to me. Going down to the state of Georgia, this one is the one that I disagree with the most. I'm not here to contest the reliability or accuracy of Nate Silver or FiveThirtyEight. I really do enjoy looking at their forecasts and polls, but I can't see, really speaking, the justification for this race. Herschel Walker has a 53% chance at victory, and it looks like about a fourth of these iterations are heading off into runoff elections, similar to what happened back in 2020. Now, the margins have narrowed up, and I think that's a result of the 2 new polls that were released from Herschel Walker's camp and also a nonpartisan pollster, Quinnipiac University, that show Walker down by 10 or tied with Raphael Warnock. I don't think Warnock will win by 10 by any means, but I do think that contributed to the narrowing up. But I just can't really believe that Walker is ahead right now. He very well could be. I could very well be wrong about that. I think it is a true toss-up and one of the closest races that we will watch in this election cycle. And I had it as lean Republican. But following the Dobbs decision, following the data that we have right now, I don't know if I can get behind Georgia going red at least right now. I will definitely explore it a little bit more because I need to before tomorrow's prediction. I need to see if I really want to get behind Democrats gaining another seat in the U.S. Senate. But we have to understand that this environment puts us in a position where the majority could go either way. And there are a significant portion of these outcomes that show the Democratic Party with 50 plus seats, meaning that a pickup isn't even that unrealistic. These margins here are very close. Republicans might have the upper hand, but by what? A coin toss? It's nothing super significant. Georgia does strike me as something that I don't necessarily think is entirely accurate, but I'm not going to argue with this with FiveThirtyEight. I'm not going to argue with their model. I think it is typically very accurate. I could be proven wrong. They could be proven right. But just at this point, I'm a little skeptical that Walker is ahead in the Georgia Senate race. For North Carolina, though, I 100% agree that Ted Budd is ahead. I think this margin is very realistic. Sherry Beasley almost won back in 2020 in her Supreme Court race in North Carolina, despite the fact that Donald Trump won the state by 1.3%. We didn't know the outcome of the North Carolina Supreme Court race until days after the election, beyond when North Carolina had been called for President Trump, because it came down to the 100th percentage points. Looking at Sherry Beasley's performance in 2020, she has shown us that she can outperform national Democrats. But when it comes down to the Senate race, I think Ted Budd was the right nominee. Mark Walker was certainly the wrong one. Or not Mark Walker, he was a potential candidate, but Pat McCrory was the wrong one. I think Ted Budd gave the GOP an easy victory in North Carolina. Historically, it has almost always voted for the GOP, and I do back the reasoning and the expectation from 538 that Ted Budd will be the next U.S. Senator from the state of North Carolina. Moving upwards, we have two final states, Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, Dr. Oz in an extremely close race. Dr. Oz, or Mehmet Oz, whichever one you want to use, is at a 49% chance of victory. John Fetterman is at 51%. The margin here expected to be 0.2%. It is extremely close, and for a previous period of time, Mehmet Oz had the 65%, nearly two-thirds chance at victory within the state of Pennsylvania. And that is no more. It seems to have flipped. I think a lot of that came from the fact that there are new numbers out from internal Republicans, internal Democrats, and nonpartisan pollsters that show one thing clearly, that John Fetterman is ahead of Dr. Oz in this race. The forecast has gotten extremely close. It is very narrow. A day ago it was at 52 to 48, now it's at 51 to 49. It could truly go either way. But it seems as if the Democrats are the favorite in the state of Pennsylvania. In the final state we're going to take a look at, we have the state of New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan, the incumbent Democrat, has a 72% chance of victory. This would probably be around 10 should Chris Sununu had decided to run in the New Hampshire Senate race. Sununu is exceptionally popular. I'm breaking the wall here, but we're heading over to New Hampshire because I want to show you in the coinciding governor election, Chris Sununu has greater than a 99% chance at victory within the state. There's only one iteration in which the Democrat wins, and it's by 0.4%. The impossible would have to happen for New Hampshire to go blue in the governorship. But in terms of the Senate race, it seems very probable, if not likely. Donald Bolduc, the Republican frontrunner right now, has a 28% chance at victory. In terms of the expectation, it hasn't changed much. All the data seems to be indicating that Maggie Hassan is going to win the Senate race. But it could also go another way. Donald Trump, according to 538, had about a 1 in 3 chance at victory on Election Day. Don Bolduc has about a 1 in 4 chance. Those are pretty good odds. If I was to be offered a position where I would be in a 1/4 chance at winning a Senate race, who wouldn't take that risk? It's a risk that is worth taking, and it's a risk that is possible. 1 in 4 is still a significantly high chance when this race needs to be, at least desperately needs to be, won by the Democratic Party in order for them to retain control of the U.S. Senate. When I take a look at this map, though, the reason why also I think that we should still expect partially the Democratic Party's advantage is because you look at the map. New Hampshire, okay, blue. Pennsylvania, blue. Georgia, flipped. So now they cancel each other out. Pennsylvania gain, Georgia loss, cancel each other out. We're back to 50-50. You look over at Colorado. You look at Arizona. You look at Nevada. You take a look at all the remaining states, and what do you find? Our map ends up back on 50-50. So even with the forecast that gives the Republican Party a 52% chance of victory, the Democrats still have a chance at retaining control of the Senate should all of the races go the way that 538 expects. The reason why I think the Democratic Party is down in the overall forecast is just simple math. It doesn't make sense if all of these seats would equal up to 50-50 because of the fact, or at least Democrats in the advantage, because they would all need to coincide with each other, which means the chance for that is probably lower than what we would just assume, assuming everything goes to plan. But it's not bad for the Democratic Party to be at a 48% chance of victory. All the Republicans needed was 1 seat. In 2018, the Democrats needed 2. In 2016, the Democrats needed 4. And that's assuming that Hillary Clinton won the election. Looking at the Senate race in 2022, the Republican Party should have a 95-5 chance of victory in winning control of the Senate should they have fielded the right candidates for these races. Should they had Sean Parnell in Pennsylvania. if they had Doug Ducey in Arizona, if they had a better nominee in the Georgia Senate race, maybe Doug Collins, someone that people find electable and know and recognize and isn't just a celebrity stunt. Walker might be the favorite, but I can guarantee you found a better Republican, they would have had a much higher chance of victory. Republicans are running the risk of losing control of the Senate in a year that is so favorable and so easy. This isn't 2010 when Democrats have a 59-41 majority. This isn't 2014 when Democrats have a 54-46 majority or 55-45. This is a majority that is 100% attainable for the GOP. And yet they still remain with just a 52% chance of victory. I think that needs to be really thought about on the Republican Party side. Why is it a race and a state and a national environment so beneficial, resulting in a 1 in 2 chance of victory? That's the internal reflection that needs to be taken from this. And the Democrats can't get complacent, but this isn't bad for them whatsoever. I still am going to stand by my expectation that Democrats do retain control of the Senate. I don't think it will be by a lot. In fact, my prediction matches up what 538 predicts, but Georgia at least, and this is also a prediction from post-Dobbs decision and post-data from Georgia, I don't know if I entirely agree with that one. But at the end of the day, it's pretty close to what I have, and I think 538 has done a good job with this forecast. I would encourage you to check it out, look at the House, look at the governorship, because we're going to be covering those for the next 2 days and talking about what they mean for the November midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.